Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I am the broadcast engineer.
Okay, take a deep breath, Josh, because we are going down a huge rabbit hole.
This is crazy. We came up with the idea again, or we're extending our idea of should have seen. So these are two movies that one of which you have not seen and the other which I have not seen. So new for each of us. But instead of going with like manageable, normal-sized, basic movies, we decided to go with two of the biggest, most epic, hugest films of all time. So, wow. I don't know why we did this, but it was kind of fun, actually. So, you have never seen Ben-Hur before, and I have never seen Lawrence of Arabia before. Why haven't you seen Ben-Hur?
Probably for the same reasons that you haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia. It just has never... I don't know why, actually. I don't know why this wasn't a tradition in my house at some holiday time to watch it. It's like the perfect entertainment for young Catholics growing up, young religious people growing up, really. Yeah. Well, I mean, but we had our traditions as Catholics, and in any religion you have your tradition, but at Easter you watched, now it's the Passion of the Christ, but it was Moses, the Ten Commandments. And then it was the Max von Sydow, Jesus of Nazareth. And there were certain things at certain times of the year that you watched. And back in the day when I was young, you could not just pop a DVD in and continuously watch it whenever you wanted. So at the holidays, Christmas, you watched the Christmas specials. I think right in springtime, summertime, you watched The Wizard of Oz. Somewhere in the late summer, you watched Chitty Bang Bang, which I love. So the reason why I've never seen Ben-Hur is unexplainable. It should be part of my movie-going experience. Now, that said, there are tons of movies that we have not seen.
Sure.
I have not seen. You can't see everything.
Yep.
My goal is to eventually have seen all of the Academy Award-winning Best Pictures, and I'm doing pretty good with that. So I don't know what the reason is. There was never a time that it came into my life and I went, no, I don't feel like watching that right now. Or there was a time when I lived in LA, and because they show these things all the time. There's a whole movie theater that's just black and white, silent movies. Yeah, a whole theater of them.
Wow.
So, they do Charlie Chaplin festivals. They do Buster Keaton festivals. They just do, and there's tons of silent movies. So they just show those repetitively. All the marquee, I don't know if it still exists, but it did when I lived there. All the marquee is in black and white. All the posters are in black and white. Everything about the theater's in black and white. It's pretty cool. And then there's old theaters that show every 6 months The Bicycle Thief or The Bicycle Thieves, depending on who puts up the marquee.
Yeah.
There was never a time that somebody said, hey, the 50th anniversary of Ben-Hur is coming out. Do you want to see it at the Cinerama Dome? And I know that they did it, but maybe I wasn't there at the time. So it's not like I avoided it or I just didn't feel like watching it. There is not a good explanation why.
Yeah.
That said, I've accomplished it. I have finished Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
I am 126 years of age now, but I have finished Ben-Hur.
Yeah, it only took you 3 hours and 32 minutes, right? So, yeah, that's probably one reason why you might not have ever, bit that off, because, I mean, it is one of those things where, like, I really wanted and on my side, I really wanted to see Lawrence of Arabia, like, in one sitting, but it's in a lot of ways, especially just with, like, I'm lucky enough to still be going to a job and all that. It's just sitting down and watching the movie for 3.5 hours. And in Lawrence of Arabia's case, I think it was even longer. It was, 3 hours and 48 minutes. Like, come on. It takes some fortitude, but still, I mean, both of these movies, they are, in every sense of the word, huge. I mean, they are... The production value, the literal film size, these were both shot on 65 millimeter film, which was fairly new back then. And they were both right around the same time. Ben-Hur came out 59 and Lawrence of Arabia came out in 62. This is like peak, hey, please come to the movie theater. Just because you have a TV in your house doesn't mean you never have to go to the movies ever again. Like, this is like their big pitch to get butts in the seats, and they're like, we will give you a huge cinematic experience, and that is definitely, I mean, Ben-Hur definitely like swung for the fences as far as that's concerned. So we'll talk about Lawrence of Arabia a little bit later on, but I do think we should get into Ben-Hur, directed by William Wyler, a huge studio movie with a bunch of money, a bunch of resources thrown at it, and you can see it is one of those movies where, at least from a technical side, all of that money is on the screen. I mean, it has extensive use of matte paintings and things that allow it to the scale to increase. And I was really impressed with that. But at the same time, like, there's obviously the film is known for its famous chariot race about 2/3 of the way into the movie. And that you can't fake that. Like, back then, you could not fake that. They just redid Ben-Hur. And I think it was probably like a couple of years ago, it was probably all CG. So, I mean, they probably didn't even have horses. Like, it was probably like just a guy standing on a platform that was green, holding pieces of leather, like that's, for rain.
Look here, look there. Yeah,
exactly.
Here comes the wind. Yeah. You're right. And that movie's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, by the way.
Oh, well, there you go.
The only reason I want to experience that is because I want to see what they did to get it down to 2:15. I think it's even shorter than that. But I'm curious, what did they cut out in order to get it down? I'm curious if it is just an action film, which Ben-Hur is an action picture, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's also, finger quotes, a historical drama. It's also the story of Christ, the whole story of Christ, if you will.
From the very beginning, yeah. Like the first scene is, well, first you have the overture. You got a 6-minute overture.
Okay, well, yeah. Let me ask you this. I know. Now, see, I'm used to overtures because I'm a theater, musical theater baby. Okay, so I'm used to that. I was wondering when I was watching it, probably stuff that I shouldn't be wondering while I'm watching it. I was wondering if you could do this in 2020, or if you could make a movie that's almost 4 hours long with an overture and an intermission, which is almost 7 minutes long, by the way. So that's 14 minutes of a film.
Yeah.
If a regular movie is an hour and 45 minutes, what's the percentage? I mean, it's a nice chunk of that. I mean, it's 15 minutes of that. That's a significant amount of a movie that's an hour and 45 minutes. You could miss a lot if you miss 15 minutes of name your movie that's out there that's 2 hours now.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, could a person who was born in 1980, now I'm sure they can, but does it take somebody who has a special interest in film to have to sit through this and sit through it in the theater? Let's say they did, an anniversary and it came back out. Oh, by the way, that's my goal. I'm going to search out if Lawrence of Arabia ever gets played in the theater again. I'm going to search out, and that's going to be my vacation destination. And I'm going to go to that town or wherever so I can see it in a live theater. And same with Ben-Hur. I want to see this on the big screen because you are missing stuff. Not missing stuff, but you're missing, especially
the feeling
in the second film we're going to talk about.
So Hateful Eight is about the closest you can get to that, because that did come out about 5 years ago and it was almost 3 hours long.
Oh, okay.
And it did have somewhat of an overture. The credits scene at the beginning, where that long shot starting on the cross and coming out, and then it did have an intermission in there. At least the Roadshow version of it had an intermission, and I think the Roadshow version might have been about 3 hours long, because it did add about 12 minutes of footage. So yeah, I think that if you're Quentin Tarantino, maybe you can do that, but even earlier on when he came out with Kill Bill, he split it up into 2 movies. I think a lot of that has to do with the movie theaters themselves. Like, they don't want to have to, nowadays, they want to be able to turn over theaters, but back then, you've also got to remember that they did a lot of double features, and they had newsreel, especially if it's like late 50s. So, I mean, we're at the end of you're past the Korean War. So there's really not a lot of like war stuff going on, but sometimes they would have like newsreels, then they would have a cartoon, and they would do the first movie, and then they would have a little bit of an intermission between the first movie and the second movie, and then maybe another cartoon, and then the second movie. I mean, it was like a night at the movies. I mean, it was like a 4-hour-long block of entertainment for you. So this would be similar, where it just wouldn't be a double feature. You would just watch Ben-Hur only for the whole night. So maybe people were used to that duration.
Scorsese's The Irishman was 3.5 hours long, no overture, no intermission. So it has been done, and that was this. Oh, it was released on Netflix though. They kind of okay, yeah, doesn't count. Kind of, it does, but it doesn't. I went to the theater to see it because I didn't want to do the 20-minute thing. All things considered, it's not about the theater. It's not about a double feature. It's not about the theater making money. It's not about packing in the multiplex. It's about, would a group of people be interested in sitting through a 4-hour film with an overture and an intermission, and especially these complicated storylines? Ben-Hur, not as much, because we're familiar with quite a bit of it. Yeah. But when we get to Lawrence of Arabia, I have a point about that. It's so brilliant the whole time that once you get 2 hours past whatever was so brilliant, there's like 40 million brilliant things all the way to the next 2 hours. And you kind of forget what you've seen because everything is so brilliant. You can't really take it all in and remember it. If you're halfway through Lawrence of Arabia and you're thinking about it, what the hell just happened in 2 hours that you watched? There are some bullet points that you can get through, but they're all so brilliant that it's so episodic. You can't focus on, you have to focus on the moment. Yeah. Same with Ben-Hur. Okay, by the way, Titanic was 3 hours and 15 minutes. Oh. That's still in the last couple decades, if you will. We have an endurance because we go to a lot of movies and we watch a lot of things. You and I have an endurance. We have a muscle that we've built up. And if we're finding it interesting, it's not a struggle, because a struggle connotates that it's painful. It's not painful. It's actually very enjoyable. But if we're finding it difficult on some level to focus for 3.5, 4 hours and not want to fast forward through the overture, not want to fast forward through the intermission, which I think is fair. If you fast forward through the intermission, you are totally into it. But if you don't fast forward through the intermission and then you pause the intermission so you can go do some stuff and come back, that doesn't count. You have to just do the 6 minutes of the intermission. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, would people be able to sit through something like this?
Yeah. So what is it about Ben-Hur? I mean, I thought that the structure of the film being, wanting to tell ultimately it wants to tell Jesus' story. It wants to tell the story of the Christ, but it does it from kind of an oblique angle. And I thought that was interesting. And even though, Jesus is an ancillary character, you still have a through line in the film. And then we also get to see the immense drive. I mean, both of the main characters of each of these movies have this immense drive that is built into them. And seeing that, I mean, it's obsession essentially that overtakes them is really interesting. I think that's inherently interesting in a film. I mean, seeing someone who's so passionate that's such an easy character trait to exploit in a film, and both of these movies do it really well. But what was the main thing that jumped out to you in this movie, like the number one highlight for you in this movie?
Well, it comes down to what you said. It comes down to what you would consider an everyday guy, everyman, although both the two characters in Ben-Hur and Lawrence of Arabia are sort of heightened characters because Judah Ben-Hur is a owner of slaves, even though he's humble and he doesn't want to own them, and he releases them as soon as he finds out he owns them. He's humble, but he is in a position of life that has been a little bit higher in his society. So he's not had a cushiony upbringing, but he's had a fairly easier upbringing than everybody else outside his house. And he's had this great friend. And of course, as soon as you meet the Marsala character, that guy's turning dirty. And I believe that guy is Boyd. What was his name? Scott Boyd or Steve Boyd?
Stephen Boyd.
Stephen Boyd. He was excellent. So great. One of the best spoiler. One of the best death scenes I've ever seen in a film he has. If you get to it. I'm going to make jokes like that throughout the whole entire film. So I like the idea that a person it's a fish out of water, if you will, because he's taken out of the circumstances of his cushiony upbringing, for lack of a better term. He wants to do the right thing. And then by accident, something happens that he takes responsibility for that is not his responsibility technically, although, he doesn't want to see his sister take that responsibility. So he was there too when this accident happened.
Yeah.
But he didn't cause it, and technically neither did she. And because of the way people and men want power and need power and have to prove that they're powerful, his best friend turns on him because and he even says it, if I turn on my best friend, people will be scared of me. It's a terrible, men suck. We suck. You don't see a woman fighting in any of these movies. What the hell
You don't see a
is wrong
woman
with
in
our
Lawrence of
species?
Arabia, so that's a whole.
Yeah, I was going to mention that when we talk about that too, that there's no love interest, which I find fascinating for a 4-hour movie, that there's nothing at all, not an indication, nothing. And there's barely one in Ben-Hur.
I think it's tenuous, but you're right. That is not what drives him in this movie. His love interest to his newly freed slave is not what drives him in the movie. It's his mother and sister. The well-being of his mother and sister that drives him.
It's more basic for me. Righting a wrong that should have never had to be turned right. He's not in a circumstances that he did anything wrong, and he has to right that wrong, and then perseverance. That's what these two films are about.
Yeah, and I think even if he were put to death, like even if somebody was like, you know what, you're gonna have to die, and if he knew that his sister and his mother were safe, I think he probably would have been okay with that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But just the fact that his sister and mother were unjustly imprisoned, I think that's his main motivating force. Because he thinks that the girl that he likes, that he releases, he thinks she's going to get married in some other place. So at the last time he saw her, she's gone.
Long enough time for her to get married. Yeah.
Well, but he didn't know that she got caught up in all that.
But it's about persistence.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about being determined to right a wrong, and I like that. And both of them say it too, although Lawrence kind of loses his mind, not kind of does, but Judah Ben-Hur puts his finger right in Marcella's face and says, I'll be back, dude. I will be back. And then later when he comes back, he said, I told you I'd be back. I love moments like that in movies. And the fact that Charlton Heston doesn't overplay it, it's so simplistic, his performance. It's an Academy Award-winning performance. It's an 11-time Academy Award-winning picture. By the way, tying with Lord of the Rings and I think Titanic. But here's the thing. Back in Ben-Hur day, what year was it again?
59.
1959. The categories were different. So it was more difficult to win 11 Academy Awards.
Amazing.
And both Lord of the Rings and Titanic don't have acting Oscar wins. And Lord of the Rings doesn't have acting Oscar nominations. So not only did it win its 2 acting nominations, it won 9 other. So it's a feat. It's a feat. And it deserves it. I see why it's won everything. But yeah, the whole idea of a person, he says it, I lived 3 years in the galley.
Yeah.
I lived in that. And, you're going to say that my sister and mother didn't last this long. You're going to say I couldn't last this long. I did this. So I know when I come back, they will be alive. And even though somebody kind of twists his fate at the end, he still comes back looking for them, even though he thinks they are not where they're supposed to be. But he comes back anyway. And that's it. Even after he finds out what their fate has been, he still physically grabs them, which freaks me out.
But I think the other thing that I enjoyed, because and you kind of brought it up, is that if he were to start his life as a slave with his family or as someone in a lower station, like you said, then him getting through those 3 years in the galley may have been, maybe it's kind of like I was forged in fire and I was ready for this because my whole life has been a struggle. No, his life hasn't been a struggle. And his life has been relatively easy for the entirety of it up until this point where his best friend betrays him. But he still had the fortitude to get through those years in the galley and to understand that his relationship with the head of the ship or, with the captain of the ship was going to pay dividends later on. And to understand that how power is structured, to know who to get up next to and who to stay away from.
Well, you know what I thought of, and this is a weird leap, but I'm going to make it. We talked about Joker. And the one thing about Joker there was a few things about Joker that didn't really click for me. But the one thing that I realized was that things just happen to Joker or Joaquin Phoenix's character. Things just happen. And his life goes a certain way because of things just happening. And my brother made a good point. He said, well, isn't that what all movies do? All characters, things just happen to them. And I said, but it depends on how the character reacts to them that makes it more interesting or less interesting to me. The only thing that Joker does, Arthur Fleck, the only thing that he does is goes to Arkham Asylum and looks up information about his mother. He finds that out. But technically speaking, the real beef to that information, the real meat to it, is told to him by Thomas Wayne in that bathroom. He doesn't find that out. He doesn't search that out. And he doesn't do anything because of it. He just reacts to it. Both Ben-Hur and Lawrence of Arabia are two men, and it reminded me of Patton also, these epic men who know that they are put on this earth to do something more than just exist. You know, Patton thought he was like this reincarnation. He even said it on this day, this battlefield, and back in the 1800s. And you're like, what did he just say? But he honestly believes that he's like this general that was reincarnated. It blew me away when I first saw that movie. I was like, why? He's really taken seriously, but he honestly believes that. And of course, Lawrence, in Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, he even says, I'm extraordinary. And Judah Ben-Hur sort of says things like that, but he doesn't say it like that. He says it, it's not humble when Patton or T.E. Lawrence says it. It's just factual when they say it. It sounds conceited to the ear of a person who can't possibly believe that this person thinks they're extraordinary. He's not saying it humbly. He's just saying factually. Because Ben-Hur says things so humbly, like, I will be back. He doesn't say it forcefully. He doesn't say it boastfully. He doesn't say it threatening. He says it factually. And there's a humbleness to the way that he reacts to the situations that he does. So when he is unshackled in that ship and can't figure out, why did that guy just do that? Now, that was something that was not his choice. Somebody else made that choice for him. His reaction to that choice is what makes him a great character and makes him way more infinitely interesting than a character like Arthur Fleck. Because when all poop hits the fan, we're going to get rammed. We're going to get rammed. In that epic battle scene between the boat, you can see between the slats of the window that boat is going to ram the other boat. It's so well done. It's nerve-wrackingly great. He does not run. He doesn't even consider running. He goes and he chokes the guy, hopefully just makes him pass out. I don't know. He could have killed him. But
gets his keys.
And gets the keys and starts releasing everybody else. And then when the circumstances comes up that there are people that he can save, he saves them. He stops from leaving this disaster and saves them. That's a choice the character makes. And that to me is way more infinitely interesting than just stuff that happens to a character. So the humbleness and the determination of these characters I find fascinating, because really in 2020, you and I can only imagine what we would do in circumstances beyond our control. Would we run? Would we stay? Would we suffer? Would we put somebody else's life before ours? You don't know until you're in that situation. In my head, I would like to believe I would do that. But, once that shackle is gone, I might be gone. I'm done. But that whole idea that you have the fortitude to be strong enough to care about people that you don't know nothing about, probably, because when do they have conversations?
Yeah.
Never. And he doesn't know that general or that commander. I'm not sure what they're called.
Well, the character's Quintus Arius.
But what's he considered? A Roman?
He's a commander, I think, like a ship commander. Yeah. Played by Jack Hawkins, by the way, who is in...
Yeah, and he's very good.
And he's in Lawrence of Arabia. He's the general in Lawrence of Arabia. He's the head general. He shaved his hair back a little bit to give him a receding hairline. But yeah, he's in both movies.
Yeah, I like him better in Ben-Hur as a character. Thank you very much.
The things that I was impressed by, as far as the special effects, I mean, I guess they weren't technically considered special effects, but the visual effects, I thought that I could tell that the ship battles were miniatures. Could you tell that? Because the water doesn't look right.
Yeah, I grew up watching the Sinbad movies and those kind of movies, so my suspension of disbelief with something like that is severe. I actually probably would be more pulled out on a bigger screen. It's the way the water ripples.
Yeah, it doesn't create enough waves. That's the waves aren't small enough.
Yeah, you can tell it's in a pool. Yeah, you can tell it's in a pool. Did it bother me enough to pull me out of the film? Absolutely not, because that is such an epic, great scene, and I love watching those torches go from one place to the other and things start catch on fire. So, I mean, if it was 2020 and they did that and they couldn't pull it off, I might be like, yeah, you need to figure that out.
So for me, well, yeah, I agree. Yeah, if that came out now, it would have been like, okay, guys, go back to the drawing board. But for back then, I mean, I do have a lot more. I give them a lot more rope, and especially with like the matte paintings and the, when Quintus Arius is coming up to the emperor in Rome, and he's got this chariot, and Charlton Heston, Ben-Hur's kind of riding behind him on the same chariot, and all of that, like most of that was all a matte painting, which was just amazing to me. Like I had to look that stuff up because it was so well done. It was so seamless. It looked amazing to me that they were able to integrate a very small, small amount of the frame was actually filmed and the rest of it was painted, and they were able to integrate that so perfectly. We kind of talked about matte paintings a little bit when we talked about The Adventures of Robin Hood a long time ago, but I mean, the same people that did those films did this film, and it is just... It's amazing. And also the things like the chariot race where they were riding the horses was all real, but everything around them, like most of the people in the stands were painted in those wide shots. And so that to me was crazy. And then they allowed themselves they would paint it on glass, and then they would do these process shots so that instead of doing what they did like for Star Wars, where they would do an optical printer where they would have like two separate pieces of film and then merge them together optically. So they would have, like in Return of the Jedi, they would have Luke Skywalker on the land speeder, and they would have all the trees behind him. They would have one piece of film has the trees, one piece of film has Luke Skywalker, and then they would put them together. They would composite them together. They couldn't do that back then. They didn't have those optical printers as easily, so they would do kind of like a glass type thing. So but there are I think that in this movie they may have done some optical compositing, but it looks amazing to me. I was bowled over by the pristine look of that. So
here's why they get a pass for anything that probably would pull you out of the film, because when those battalions and multitudes of people other than in the crowd are coming down the side of a mountain, that's like real human beings. They're all real human beings.
Yeah.
All of the extras, they're not any fake ones or computer generated ones. They're all being used. So there are a lot of things that, as a matter of fact, in the ship fighting sequence, there's a shot of an onboard explosion of one of those fireballs. And if you watch it very closely, because I rewound it when I was watching it, because I was like, what did that just happen? When that fireball explodes, there's a person standing next to it and his foot catches on fire.
Oh, wow.
And you can actually see him turn around and look down and stump it out. It's perfectly appropriate for what's going on, but I'm sure they didn't want anybody to catch on fire.
Yeah.
And then there's that scene where he puts that torch in that guy's face. That looks for real. In that, how did they do that?
Oh.
So any kind of, the whole crucifixion sequence is all of those people in the nativity scene in the beginning are all real people all over that land. So to organize that and get all those people to do all of that and to spend all that money to do that kind of washes away anything that might pull me out of the film. And as for that chariot race, I've heard about it a million years. It's as epic as you're expecting it to be, if not more so, but it looks so freaking dangerous. Like,
I think it was.
Yeah, you have to, those horses biting on each other, first of all, then biting at people. And then there's a couple of times that it looks like people kind of got run over, which of course is appropriate for the film, but I'm sure was not meant to happen. And you can tell in a lot of those shots, especially the wide shots of all of the chariots coming around, there's one shot in particular with him and Marsala coming around the corner, and you can tell it's Charlton Heston, and they're going at a certain speed that you can tell they didn't speed it up with the frame. It's going that fast. How did they get away with putting a mega movie star in that position, or anybody in that position? Did they film the chariot race last? Because what if somebody got hurt?
Yeah.
And it looks like that scene where Charlton Heston gets bumped and falls over it. I think that's really him doing that. And I think there's nothing fake about that. That's a real human being doing it. Whether or not it's Charlton Heston, I don't know. But I don't think it was quite meant to be what came out. I think it came out way more dangerous than they were expecting it. How did they get away with it?
Yeah, I think they had a lot of faith in the trainers of the horses, and just in the hardware, in the chariot hardware. They also did a lot of rehearsals and all that, but still, it still comes down to, on the day, anything can happen. And I think that nowadays they value the stars of movies so much higher than I'm guessing they even did back then. So it was, I'm sure it was one of those things where they were willing to take risks to get certain shots, because you're right. There was no green screen back then. So if you want to see Charlton Heston on a chariot, you need to get Charlton Heston on a chariot, because it's just not even going to be close if you do rear projection or anything like that.
Yeah, but there's some shots with that in it though, aren't there? There's some rear projection shots
with
in
him and Masala next to each other.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, when there's more interaction between them, like if it's a close-up shot, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that they didn't respect or revere the actors as much as they do now. I don't think they had a choice. Here's what we need done. Here's what we're willing to do it. And if Charlton Heston is anything like Tom Cruise, he's like, sure, I'll hang outside of a plane on a clip. Sure, I'll hang outside of a building on a sponge, whatever, a suction cup. So, and Charlton Heston is that kind of guy type of guy. So here's what we need done. Here's how safe we can get it done, but be careful. I don't think it was they didn't respect. I mean, sure, it's probably there to a degree, but and also since a few things have happened, those two people getting killed on that one film, the Twilight Zone movie.
Yeah.
The two kids and an actor got killed.
Vic
you
Morrow,
learn from those exactly. You learn from those mistakes, but I think they just were like, this is what we need to get done. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. As soon as I saw the 4 horses, I'd been like, I'm out. And then 4 horses against 7 different other groups of 4 horses. Nope. I'm sorry. That guy looks a lot like me. Put him in. I'm done.
Yeah. So, but you're right. I mean, to get that on film, the only way to do it back then is to really, really do it. So, but and it pays off, and that is the spectacle that you could only get in the movie theater. I mean, I think that they were seriously trying to save the industry with these types of movies. I mean, they were trying to make sure that people didn't just sit at home and watch TV all the time. I mean, there has to be a reason to go out to the movie theater back then. And so, I mean, that was the other reason why they chose 65 millimeter film. And with this movie, they actually shot it with anamorphic lenses. So not only is it a wider aspect ratio because of the film stock that they used, it was also even wider because they used anamorphic lenses. So the aspect ratio was 2.76 to 1. Now, most movies that we see, that we see nowadays, even if they're like quote unquote like widescreen, super widescreen, it's going to be like a Paul Thomas Anderson movie or, any kind of like what we would consider more cinematic movie nowadays is going to be 2.4 to 1. So this thing's even wider. So they're trying to utilize the breadth of the frame and be able to get, 4 horses across with Charlton Heston in the middle of the frame, in a chariot. They're trying to utilize that to kind of show you, or even like that wide shot of the Colosseum, where you see not only where all the horses are going, but you also see all of the city of Rome in the background. I mean, like those types of shots, they're just epic shots that are things that you're not going to see in your square TV at home. So, I mean, it's a swing for the fences, and they definitely put all of their money into it, and got all of their money out of it, I'm sure, and more.
So let's agree that this is a great movie. It's a part of our history. We need to watch it. It's epic. The performances are stunning. Charlton Heston blew me away. Even in the first scene, he's great when he sees Marcella for the first time. His eyes well up. He's stunning. There's a few melodramatic things that happen, more so for his love interest, who I can't remember her name right now.
Esther.
And a couple of Esther. Thank you. What is the actress's name who plays Esther?
Haya Hararit.
Yeah, I'm glad you had to pronounce that.
She's from Israel. Well, from actually Palestine, I guess. What was Palestine? But yeah.
Okay. Well, that's going to be an interesting segue into what I have to say. So we were talking about audiences in 2020. Okay, let's say 2019 and 2021. Screw 2020. Audiences in the future, because screw 2020. Audience in the future, will they be able to sit through a 4-hour movie? Now, we are in a new world, gratefully in a new world of how we look at things. And there's a big discussion about transgender people playing transgender parts, gay people playing gay parts, people of different ethnicity playing their own ethnicity, and whitewashing and all of the above. What do we do, and how do we explain to somebody in this decade that that's just the way that it was? Because obviously Charlton Heston is not from Judea. And, even Christ is borderline, the wrong, he almost has red hair. He's the wrong color, if you will. And he doesn't look like it. Even the 2 small descriptions in the Bible of him, he doesn't look like that. He never has. I get it. But then you have somebody like Howard Griffith who plays somebody who's Middle Eastern, and they, for lack of a better term, give him a brown face, which is almost blackface. And I would think that somebody who is woke in this decade would say that was blackface.
Sure.
And I wouldn't begrudge them of that. How much do we take that into consideration? And do we not watch films because they were of a different time where the white guy had to be, for lack of a better term, the white savior, which does exist, and we're getting ready to talk about one. Why, if these, and it doesn't need to be answered. I just want to pose the question to let people know that it is something that I thought about when watching this film, because it is something I've always noticed. I could never really understand why Christ was blonde-haired, blue-eyed from the Middle East. Did people like that exist who looked like that? From everything that I ever researched, they don't. So I could never figure out why they made him look like that. There's a whole history of why. Has a lot to do with the artwork from after his life, after Christ's life, and making the image look like the person who created the image. I get all that. But the question does come up in my mind, why, if people of Hollywood, in Hollywood, want to make these epic stories, even though Ben-Hur is a made-up story, but the Christ story is not, why do they want to tell these stories and not tell them with the people who were in these situations or in these countries or in these environments? Why? And I understand it's a different time. It's 1959. A white leading man would have sold this picture. I get all of that. But then, and we can jump into Lawrence of Arabia with this, then why? And a lot of those actors are of different ethnicities, but not from where the region that they're supposed to be from.
Yeah.
But Anthony Quinn has never played his ethnicity.
Mexican.
Yeah. He's never.
Omar Sharif's Egyptian, so yeah, that is like perfect casting.
Right. And then that's sort of avoided later on throughout his career. It's not been an issue for Omar Sharif to be in a different film with it not being mentioned that he is not your traditionally looking white guy in an American movie. So it just makes me ponder the question that if I was to teach a film history class and I had 20-something-year-olds asking me, well, this is whitewashed. Yeah, it is. Well, why isn't the mother at least from Judea? And then you get a lot of the Romans are always white, but then you get a lot of the Pharisees that look like they're Middle Eastern. So why are they picking and choosing who looks, and then a lot of the background characters who happen to be of a lesser, well-to-do environment all look Middle Eastern. So is that just something that happened? It's way bigger of a question to answer on this podcast, but it does make me ponder it.
Yeah, I'm not going to attempt to answer that, but I think that there are some practical reasons for certain things. For example, if there's a part that is a non-speaking part, an extra, for lack of a better word, they're going to find people that are in the area in which they're shooting. And they shot Ben-Hur in Italy and Mexico. So they're going to look like Italians or Mexicans. Like, that's just what they're going to do. And if you do have a speaking part, people in the United States, which I'm guessing was their main audience, would expect either an American accent or a British accent for any character.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are practical reasons. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean that they couldn't have been more forward thinking in 1958 when they shot this film. But I think the bigger question is, should we watch this movie now, or should we never see this movie because of the whitewashing? So I think that if someone is willing to evaluate previous art with today's standards or today's kind of like generally held beliefs as far as representation is concerned, then there's going to be a lot of art that no one's ever going to see. So we need to, somebody individually would need to determine whether they want to do that or not. If that was the way that you were going to go about your movie going experience from now on, then you would never see Ben-Hur. There would need to be some sort of like a qualifying situation where you go through and you say, I mean, very similar to like when it's like, is there any nudity in this film? Is there any profanity in this film? Is anybody smoking in this film? I mean, it would be one of those things. Is there any whitewashing in this film? Okay, well, I don't watch movies that have whitewashing in them. All right, well then you're never going to see Ben-Hur, which you could be totally fine with. It's not something that you have to do. But for people who really enjoy film, I mean, I think that there are interesting and engaging things in this movie that they would just never see, based on one particular criteria. Neither way is right or wrong, because that it's not one of those, like, it's not a thing that needs to be dictated, but it probably would be beneficial going forward if things like, websites that evaluate movies or even like IMDb or something like that would notate those types of things. Because you're right, there's clearly whitewashing going on in this movie and in Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
But, spoiler alert, Lawrence of Arabia is an amazing film, and I'm so happy that I've seen that movie. And the whole time, every time I saw Anthony Quinn, I looked at his nose and I was like, oh my gosh, like this. First of all, like I saw it in 4K, like 4K restoration, pristine, looks amazing, and the makeup doesn't look as good when when it's in 4K versus seeing it on a TV or something. But and secondly, there's nothing wrong with his nose, with his actual nose, but they gave him some sort of prosthetic to make it a very pronounced nose that is, I would think, stereotypical of a particular person from that area. And so that to me seemed like a bad move.
Or the guy could look like that. Maybe the guy he's based on looks like that.
That's true,
yeah,
because he was probably still alive at the time. So that's very well true. Maybe I didn't go in and look at a picture of him, but it just seemed to me like I was like, that was something that you just didn't have to do. But anyway, there can inherently be issues with films from the past. We just have to evaluate what the motive of that film was at the time, and not necessarily like, specifically make excuses for anything that happened, but use it as an educational opportunity. Gone with the Wind, another perfect example. Does that glorify the South during the Civil War? Yes. So does that mean that story is not inherent to America? No. I mean, but we can use it as, and actually HBO Max, I don't know if you've read any of this, but HBO Max does, they decided to remove it from HBO, essentially. They decided to remove the film, and then a few weeks later, when they put the film back on HBO, they had two separate programs. One was an introduction, and one was a Q&A about how the film portrayed the South and how the film portrayed slave owning people from the South, and so I think that at least shows that just because something is about a particular subject matter doesn't mean that you're saying that everything's a-okay with that subject matter. I mean, films are made all the time looking at unsavory people and really difficult situations that I think allow us to see into those arenas without necessarily approving of the behavior that's on screen.
Yeah, everything we've seen in the last 10 years.
Well, yeah.
Everything Ari Aster's made, everything that Paul Thomas Anderson's made, everything in The Joker, everything we've seen from the last 4 or 5 of our podcast.
I think that and what we're starting to see is that there was low representation of people in smaller groups, whether it's ethnic groups or groups based on sexuality or, based on underrepresented groups. They didn't have a voice. Now we're hopefully getting to a point where people in marginalized groups do have more of a voice. And now that they do, they can advocate for themselves, and people who are not part of those groups can also advocate for them. And one of those ways to do that is to look at casting a particular person who meets a certain criteria in a future project. But that's going forward. That's not retroactively canceling out what happened in the past.
Well, that's like saying prohibition, and this is a simplification of it. Prohibition was illegal in certain years. Do we not watch movies about prohibition? I totally get what you're saying. My 2 points are this. First of all, there is a warning for smoking, nudity, profanity, violence, and all that other stuff. And you're right. Maybe there should be a certain decade warning. In this decade, they'll probably find some better diplomatic way to say whitewashing exists. We don't excuse it, but this is what happened. I think people are smart enough to know that if they're glorifying the South in Gone with the Wind, that wasn't the truth. Unfortunately, people might not be smart enough to know the difference because people believe what they see. My point to all of that was, and I'm glad that we got into it for a couple of minutes because I think it's an important subject, that I'm not going to say don't see Ben-Hur because it's not representative of its time frame thoroughly. I'm going to say see Ben-Hur because it's part of our film history and it's an epically great movie and its performances are stunning. Okay. That said, my question is, and we can move on, but my question always is, why make a movie about a certain group of people and not cast those people? That's all. I've never understood that when I was a kid. If we're going to find the story interestingly enough about the Turkish soldiers or anybody in Turkey or anybody in Damascus in this next film that we're going to talk about, then why are we not casting the people who are from there? I understand the reasons why we don't and haven't, and we're moving on. But it just always is a phenomenon to me that somebody's so interested in a story that exists and happened a certain way, but then when they go to make it, they alter it. And it's happened all the way up to recently, with Cameron Crowe and that whole thing with the
Aloha
Hawaiian picture with, yes. And, everybody's apologized about it. So I'm just always fascinated that you have it's like, okay, you have a play and you have these great characters and there's 7 of them. But then when you write the movie, you make it 4 because you combine 2 of the characters, but yet you found that play interesting. Why not make it the movie with 7 characters? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why people alter things. This is the story. Tell the story for what it is. All right, let's move on. Thank you for that, though. I appreciate you indulging me on that, but I feel like that's an important thing for us to talk about and be aware that people are aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it too. So yeah, I think it's a valid thing to think about when talking about older films, especially.
Now, this is where you're supposed to edit in the score from Lawrence of Arabia right here.
Oh my gosh.
That epic score. So
great. When it started and it didn't have, especially after seeing Ben-Hur, because I saw Ben-Hur first and then I watched Lawrence of Arabia, just beginning the movie in black with just the overture, I was just like, oh, see, this is, it felt right. Like, it felt right because I just wanted, like, the first image to be I was expecting a lot out of this movie. My story with Lawrence of Arabia is that I've heard so many good things about it, and I've seen snippets of the film, in certain, like, whether it's a YouTube video or whatever, kind of like saying, like, you want to know how to do this? Look at this. Look at how David Lean did this in Lawrence of Arabia, or look at this performance. But I knew that it was going to be an amazing epic film, and I really wanted to see it in the theater. And I've just been waiting to see it in the theater. I would have loved to seen it in 70 millimeter, on 70 millimeter film, but it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened for me. And I got to the point where I'm just like, I need to see this film. And they did just recently come out with a 4K restoration, HDR, all that stuff. And so, I mean, watching that on amazing television, I think that it lived up to all the hype. I mean, the film is the depth and the breadth of the frame is immense. Like, I just don't understand it. I was also expecting, like, every shot I was like trying to look at, especially the kind of panoramic shots that you see in this film, which there are so many of. I was just expecting to see things like, where did they do a matte painting of this? Just right after seeing Ben-Hur, I'm like, oh wow, okay, they did all kinds of, like, they must have done these like crazy cool, amazing clouds in the background, and then these like craggy rocks, and then there's some camels in the front that they probably shot. No, there were no matte paintings in this film. It was all practical. It was all real. It just boggles the mind. The fact that they shot for like 280 days or something insane like that, like, it is the definition of dedication. And I can't imagine all the people, not just David Lean, obviously, but all the people associated with it, all the people on the crew, obviously all of the actors, and then all of the Bedouins that they got to be extras in the film too. It just amazes me, the dedication that you can see in a film like this. And I was just bowled over by the sheer amazing imagery. That has nothing to say about the story, really. Like, you could watch this movie with just like an isolated score, no dialogue, and I think it would still be a satisfying experience, because I think the score does enhance the film a lot, like a lot.
Oh, it is the definition of movie score. Because I'll be honest with you, when the overture started with Ben-Hur, I thought it was West Side Story. For whatever reason, I started hearing West Side Story. And so I thought, I don't remember feeling that way when I first saw Lawrence of Arabia. So is that going to happen too? And then instantaneously, those 2 or 3 notes of what becomes the repetitive melody of the movie. It's so beautiful.
And that's Maurice Jarre is the composer of, I guess they hired a bunch of people to do the score, but they ended up to do certain sections of the score, but they ended up, once they heard Maurice Jarre's different sections of the score, they were just like, we're just going to use all of those. So, but that actually, and in hearing that, I heard that and I was like, did John Williams just rip him off for all of the Indiana Jones movies? Because like, that is, to me, like, that was like the best score of a film ever for me. Is pretty much all the Indiana Jones movies, and obviously like Star Wars and all that stuff too, but it just felt so right. I mean, like, you could probably score Raiders of the Lost Ark with this music, like, it with certain scenes of it. It was just awesome. So I will talk about the technical side of this because I love it. They also shot this film in 65 millimeter, but they ended up not using anamorphic lenses, so they used spherical lenses, so it's not as wide as Ben-Hur that we just talked about, but they did do some kind of crazy stuff. The one scene I've seen before is our introduction to Omar Sharif's character Ali as he comes towards the camera when Lawrence and his guide are at the well close to the beginning of the film. And the fact that they were able to figure out a way to replicate a mirage on film, because they had never been able to do that before. And in fact, Panavision, who provided the lenses for the film, made a special lens just for that shot. It was a 482 millimeter lens, which was probably, I think I saw a picture that I think it was like maybe 3 feet long or something. I mean, it's huge. And it allowed them to be able to keep something so far away, to keep the mirage part in focus, because other lenses that they tried to use, everything was just out of focus to the point where you didn't actually see the kind of like heat coming off of the floor of the desert and that intermixing with Omar Sharif coming towards the lens. So, and that actually was Omar Sharif riding on the camel the whole way.
You know what? I thought about that and I thought, yeah, why not? You'd have to do it.
Sure.
Because there's a sense that all of that is legit throughout this whole film.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, all the there's little things. There's kind of like rocks on the sides that are kind of at angles towards where the two characters are, and there's like a line of, I don't know, some like sawdust or something. I don't know. There's something yellow on the ground that kind of like gives it a direction. Like, so we know where to look as an audience. We know, like, we can't see anything just yet at the beginning of the shot, at the beginning of that shot, but we know where to look at. And so once you start seeing something come out of the center of the frame, you know that, and just the way that he cuts it, you feel this menace. And really it starts way before then, because the way that it was, I did a bunch of reading up on this shot. Not only do we get this kind of like sense of dread from the guide as he sees somebody coming from the distance, but way before that, when they stop at the well, and do you remember, I don't even remember much about that scene, but like Lawrence kind of like lays down on a mound of dirt and like plays around with his compass. It just seems like wasted time, but what it's doing is it's kind of like lulling us into this kind of like state of complacency as an audience, and we're just like getting super, super calm. And I saw an interview with David Lean, and he said he was talking with none other than the director of Ben-Hur, William Wyler. And William Wyler said, if you're going to shock an audience by what happens in this scene, get them almost to the point of boredom before doing so. So having that kind of pearl of wisdom from William Wyler, he set out to make this scene where we are just completely calm, and then it gets ramped up and we don't even know what's going to happen. I mean, it is shocking. That it was shocking to me. Spoilers, I guess. Spoilers. But on YouTube, I would always see him like coming towards the lens, and I didn't see what happened at the end of the scene. But also the intercutting, you know, it gets him closer and closer and closer. I think that in some ways it would be interesting to know if that would have been better if we would have just seen like a full, whatever, like 2-minute long scene of him riding towards the camera with no cuts. But it is good to see Lawrence, to see the reaction on Lawrence and the guide. But yeah, that scene was just amazing to me.
Well, it also sets up the next 4 hours.
Sure.
It sets it all up.
And talk about an introduction to a character. I mean, dang.
Yeah. You don't know who to trust. You can't trust anybody. You're never going to like this guy. How does the main character react? And it also sets you up to know that all you have to do is be the wrong person in the wrong place because of territorial rights amongst these clans or these tribes. And if you're not wearing the right thing or not doing the right thing, or you're drinking water, life-saving water from the wrong well, you're dead. And that is just a factual thing that happens. Now, granted, it also does something that I think is kind of a miracle, because when you meet Omar Sharif for the first time, you hate him. You hate what he does. You don't understand why he did it. You think Peter O'Toole, and he gives him that dead stare. And then also it leads to that later scene when he goes back to rescue that guy and he's like, nothing is written. But when he first shows up, what's great about that is David Lean doesn't do a close-up on that shot. When Omar Sharif in that scene, I jumped scenes, by the way, as you know, and Peter O'Toole come into that frame, Peter O'Toole is laser staring at Omar Sharif like, what did you tell me I couldn't do? Who were you? I don't like you. But it's this stare and it's this just grueling look that he gives him. And all of that set up in this opening sequence. And it is not anything a moviegoer is expecting to happen. But it needs to happen because all of the other devastating things that are going to happen to the main character and everybody else around him are just as devastating. And just as heartbreaking. So you need to know up front, this is where, one, this character is coming from, and two, how this other main character, Lawrence of Arabia, Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence, is going to react to it. So it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
It's jarring and it's really soul-stirringly upsetting because you're like, wait, what did that guy do? Because you're assuming that the guy who gets shot is just trying to make sure that this stranger is not going to do anything bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not why he got shot. He got shot because he is not supposed to be where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not supposed to be doing what he's doing. And it sets it all up.
Well, I think he did get shot because he pulled out a weapon, and I think that you could go back to the scene before that where Lawrence gives him that gun. That's the revolver that Lawrence gave him. And then so Omar Sharif's character Ali, he takes the gun, keeps it, and then later on in the film, Lawrence takes the gun from him, and we're getting super into spoilers now, but Lawrence takes the gun from him, uses that gun to kill Gazim, who he saved. So, I mean, that is like, that's the Chekhov's gun throughout the whole film. He even uses that gun to put out of the misery that one of the two servants. I mean, they're not like, they're just following him. Not because he's paying them, but because they like him, I guess.
Well, they follow him at first because I think it's because he's a foreigner and he doesn't look like anybody else that they know, and there's something mysterious about him. But then he eventually does start to pay him. They make a deal. They ask for a certain amount of money, and then the younger guy goes, each. And he goes, okay, fair enough.
Okay, that's cool. Right. Okay.
But T. Lawrence needed those young people, those young guys, who probably are my two favorite characters in the movie, by the way. Amongst everybody else, of course, but they're just great, and it's just devastating what happens to them. Oh, it's terrible. It's like it's just wrong. You can't do that. The two people who should have survived this without any kind of mental disruption or any kind of conflict of heart should have been them, but nope.
Do you know what that reminded me of? The quicksand reminded me of Atreyu. Oh my gosh, in Neverending Story. Oh my gosh.
I've never seen it.
Oh no! Don't see it. Don't see that movie. It scarred me as a child. It's
past my age at the time. So when I was young, I thought quicksand was going to be something I was going to have to deal with almost every other day of my life because every show, Bonanza, Lassie, somebody was dying in quicksand, or somebody's car got in, carriage got into quicksand. So when this guy dips into quicksand, I'm like, oh no, it's always something. And the Campbell's like, I've been here before, later, I'm done. Like I poop, poop, poop. And he jumps up and out and he gets out. But I would venture to say that I don't think that the guy who gets shot pulls out that gun in anything but defense. I don't think that he doesn't point that gun at Omar Sharif. He has it to his side when he gets shot in the head. So I think it is Omar Sharif can't see that. Well, he might be able to see the gun, but he can see his clothing and he can see that he's not supposed to be from that area. So it's irregardless of whether or not he was going to try to shoot at him, he was dead because of that.
Yeah. Another scene that I actually, it's kind of like a pairing of scenes where we start to see the relationship. Once he brings back Azim, he gets the respect of Ali, of Omar Sharif's character, and he gives him a full set of robes and a dagger. And then we get this like weird, like I'm all alone. I'm going to check out my awesome new duds and my dagger. And he looks at his dagger and is using the dagger, the mirror of the dagger, to kind of like check himself out and like see how cool he looks. And that whole scene, especially like just that image of him holding the dagger up and looking into it. I mean, it is cinematic, and we do get at the eventuality of that scene, we get to meet Anthony Quinn's character. But that seemed like a very big scene for the Lawrence character, for Peter O'Toole's character, because he's indulging himself in the pageantry of the situation, in him belonging to this group. He feels that belonging, which we kind of know earlier on in the film. His dad never claimed him. And so I guess somehow this is a father-son movie again. But his dad,
shocker. Yeah,
his dad never claimed him. But now he kind of feels like this, these people claim him. And so that it solidifies that portion of his character. But later on in the film, when they go through and and massacre all of the Turks, and he's just like covered in blood. He's kind of leaning up against that truck or whatever in the doorway of the truck, and he's holding up that dagger again, which is blood stained, and he's got blood all over his what used to be white robes, and he's looking at himself in the dagger, and it's such a great kind of bookend scene. And it's just like, I look at movies nowadays that do that and I'm like, oh, it's such genius, and it's so amazingly well crafted. And it's just like, yeah, David Lean's doing it back then. It's not a new thing. And utilizing the film medium to see these representative pairings, it's so cool. And it is a very overt way of showing a character's journey, and whether it's a good way or a bad way. And in this case, he's definitely slid a certain direction. And also, when he's in that initial scene looking at all of his robes, he sees his shadow, and he's able to kind of like look at the stature of his shadow and see how he moves in the robes by seeing his shadow. And because he obviously doesn't have a mirror or anything, like a full length mirror or anything like that, but he uses the sun and the shadow to see how he moves in the robes. And then when they take over that train, when they derail the train, and he jumps up on top of the train and everybody's cheering him, and he's running along that train, we get a whole like dolly shot from the top of the train in his point of view, looking down on what he sees, how he perceives himself, and how he thinks that all of the Bedouins perceive him after this victory. And the other cool shot, as far as that's concerned, is when he runs along that train, there's another dolly shot where it's looking up at him from everyone else's point of view. And as he's running, the dolly is moving locked with him so that he is in between the sun and the dolly. So we get this like silhouetted version of him in the frame, and it moves perfectly with him. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. And they had to like rehearse that, and it was like a huge thing. And that's another one of those things where like nowadays you can fake all that stuff, but back then they had to get it right in camera to make it work, and there was no other way to do it, and you weren't coming back. And they had one shot with blowing up that train, and it's all very kind of like controlled, but then also you don't have any other options, so you've got to make it work, and that you just get one shot. So I thought both of those scenes are just amazing filmmaking, and I think that they're subtle. They're not like the huge vistas and landscapes and all that stuff, but they really inform the film and make it so much more amazing to me.
It's interesting because when he tries on his clothing for the first time, that scene that you're just talking about, it strikes me as one of those scenes where a human being who's worn pants his whole entire life is now wearing the clothes that he was meant to be wearing. And he's wearing it because this is what's natural to him. And yeah, he is doing all the things that you said that he was doing. And this just might be my interpretation of it, but it strikes me as a person who is now fully himself, even on the outside. And because this guy is fully himself from the moment the film begins. I mean, because he's burning himself, and he's like trying to ignore the pain is the deal. And he's doing all this crazy things that most people don't do. He already has a reputation. And the reason why he gets to do what he gets to do is because he has a reputation as a soldier. So it just struck me this time when I saw it that, wow, what would it be like to actually wear something your whole entire life, and then you see other people wearing it, because he sees thousands of people wearing stuff like that for a good hour or whatever it is. It's not that long, but you know what I'm saying. And he has to be by himself when he is discovering how this really feels. And he takes off around the corner, and there's all this pomp and circumstances, and they keep telling him, go, go, go. When he goes around the corner, he gets off. And I love the fact that David Lean shot it where the sand stops, and then he gets on the kind of this like flat white surface. I'm not even sure what that is. It's some kind of stone, I guess. And it has its natural backdrop to it. It's not sand, so you don't see a bunch of sand being kicked up when he's doing that. It's on a flat surface. And it's just beautiful. And I love Anthony Quinn's reaction. He's like, what are you doing? But to him,
Yeah.
there is no discovery of these garments. It would be, what would it be like for his character to be in pants? Anthony Quinn's character to be in pants. If he had to walk around the corner and get off a camel in pants after wearing what he's worn his whole entire life, it would be something, it would be the polar opposite of what happened to Lawrence of, or T.E. Lawrence. I keep wanting to say Lawrence of Arabia, which is appropriate. So he would probably have a hard time walking in pants, and it would be a whole nother, it would be the opposite side of what we see. But it just struck me as the type of thing where this is what this man is supposed to be wearing. And, you know, we can use the word appropriate. He's not appropriating anything. He is meant to be that person. And he is deemed worthy to wear this garment. So it's not like he's dressing up to try to fit in. It's not like he's trying to dress up to disguise himself. It's not like he's trying to dress up because he thinks they're cool. It's none of that. It is who he was meant to be at that point. It's epic. And you're right, that shot on the train is the shot that I'm used to. That's the shot that I grew up seeing from Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, that's the shot. And the one shot of him coming over, the last shot that you were talking about with the sun, between the dolly and the sun, that's the that's a huge shot that's in the memory of film from past for me that I haven't seen, but I have seen now.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the way that David Lean is able to shoot these large scenes, like, so one thing just in doing some reading for this film, and I don't know if I internalized it the first time I saw it, but after seeing a few more scenes again, actually Steph and I were watching it while we were eating dinner tonight, but all the scenes with them, I mean, there's multiple scenes of him and a group of Bedouins, or the different groups that he's with, moving across the desert. They're always moving from left to right, and he said that was a, kind of meant to show a certain progress. And I mean, obviously in the United States and in England, we write from left to right, even though they write from right to left in Arab countries. But still, we kind of inherently will sense a feeling of progress and of moving forward by things going from left to right, and it is very consistent, at least on a second rewatch, as much as I rewatched, where he does give that feeling, and then just the way that he's able to frame, like, a lot of his shots are in thirds, where the bottom third is the people moving across the land, and the center third is the vastness of the desert, and then the top third is the landscape of mountains, cliffs, all of that stuff. And then there are other times where he'll do the bottom third is the desert, and then the top 2/3 is the sky, whether it's the sky that's just empty or the sky with clouds in it. And there's a consistency to it, but it is composed like still photography, but it's much more dynamic to me because it's amazing colors and real people in real environments interacting with that environment, and nothing feels disingenuous. Like, we're so used to seeing Andy Serkis, being remade as a 3D, fake whatever it is, whether it's Gollum or Caesar in the Planet of the Apes movies or whatever. I mean, like, yes, it does look realistic, but it's not realistic. Like, it's not real. Even though those things can look realistic, even though we can see thousands and thousands of orcs running through New Zealand, that's not real. But all of this stuff is real, and it really impacts me in a totally different way, because I'm not looking for the strings, because there are no strings. So, I mean, it allowed me to appreciate the film a lot more, not having to run that background process in my mind of like, oh, well, how did they do that? Where did they remove, this green screen? How did they put all this stuff together? Oh, look, they doubled this group of people in this crowd, and I can see the same people moving in the same exact way because they took 100 people and turned them into 1,000 people. It's a totally different feeling. So all of those scenes are just great to drink in to me. But then one scene that I did really, what was so small was the scene where we get to see where Lawrence says he's going to find Gazim, but after he sets out at the end of the night, right when everybody's starting to, they're starting to come in, and he's like, no, I'm going to go back for him. At the beginning of that, his journey out, we don't see him again. We just get to see the kid waiting for him.
Oh, yeah.
We get to see Gazim.
You're right.
Walking as the sun comes up, which is amazing shots. So many amazing shots of sunsets and sunrises. Like, oh, God. But we get to see Gazim walking as the sun comes up, and then he starts to shed his clothes as the sun gets higher. And then all of that's intercut with shots of the sun. Like, it's just like the sun just like beating down on you. And every successive shot of the sun, they open the aperture on the camera, so they increase kind of like the halo around the sun. So by making the sun get bigger and bigger and bigger in the frame, it makes us feel as an audience hotter and hotter and hotter and feel for Gazim each time. And the fact that we don't see Lawrence, we don't know what's happened to him. We don't know obviously he's not going to die because there's like freaking 3 hours left in the movie at that point. But we don't know what state he's in. And we don't even know how close he is to Gazim. There's no like Indiana Jones map where we get two dotted lines coming together. We don't get any of that stuff. It's all left up, to our imagination. So it's so well done and very similar to the well scene where there's this anticipation that's built up, and it's really just like 3 shots that you see, and so being able to do that to an audience is pretty masterful. I've only seen one other David Lean film, and it was Bridge on the River Kwai. So. I need to look up more of his films.
This is why I have to search out. And this is, what year is Lawrence of Arabia?
62.
I just had it, 1962. So its 60th anniversary is going to be somewhere. Somebody's going to show it, and they're going to restore it. It's going to look great. It's going to sound great. Every time I've only seen this film twice. This is the second time that I've seen it. But it's so overbearing how much of the desire to see it on the big screen and how epic it must be, because it's epic on a laptop. It's epic on my phone. It's epic on the smallest screen I have. It's just beautiful. It's so beautiful. And it's interesting how you'll see a shot in the film, meaning you, Josh, and then you'll research it, and then you'll analyze it, and then you'll be like, this is why this is happening, and the bigger and the blurrier, and you feel hotter and hotter. I kind of course, is the opposite, is that I get hot, and I'm like burning up, and I'm like, my God, get out of the sun. Is he going to live? What's happening? And then I realized that what David Lean has done did all that to me. I have a couple of technical questions, or a technical question. You see a lot of people wearing black. Mm-hmm. How come you wear black? Now, I know that I was trying to figure out their tents, though I guess those are for shade, okay? Mm-hmm. Because they're open on both sides, and they're just like these panels that are rectangles that run 7-8 feet long, and that's for shade. But doesn't black absorb the sun and white reflects the sun? So why is most of the people in the two tribes, Anthony Quinn's tribe and Omar Sharif's tribe, all are wearing black?
I think specifically the reason why Omar Sharif is wearing black is for that well shot, so that you can see him come out of the mirage more clearly because he's wearing black. If he was wearing white or blue, or probably didn't have blue dyes or whatever, but if he was wearing white or blue, then it would have been harder to see him juxtaposed against the horizon. But the fact that he's wearing black is a quick identifier for him to show up on film a lot easier. So I think that's probably a reason why he was wearing black throughout the film. But as far as like the other people in his tribe, and even Anthony Quinn's character, I think from a filmmaking standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, you can very easily pick out Lawrence in any frame, especially once even when he's wearing his like khaki British Army issue fatigues, you can still pick him out fairly quickly. And then even more so when he's wearing those pristine white robes that they give him, he's conspicuous.
Doesn't it have to be on some level period accurate? Because that would strike me as something David Lean would insist on, because, you know, obviously the way that the camels are decorated and all of that means something. Those tassels that hang from the camel, they all mean something. I'm sure a certain color means something. I'm sure the length of them means something. I'm sure they mean something. So I was just curious because I thought there's a lot of black, and I'm thinking to myself, it's not hot enough. Like, what? Yeah. I was cutting the grass 2 weeks ago in a black t-shirt, stopped in the middle of it, threw my shirt off, stood there and was like, and I never take my shirt off in public. I'm just not that guy. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah, me either.
I'm not that insecure, but I'm certainly not that secure about it. But anyway, so I stood there, I was sweating to death, and I was like, I got to go put a white shirt on because I'm burning up. And as soon as and it wasn't that much better, but it was definitely better. So I think because of that experience, I'm sitting there thinking there has to be a practical, logical reason why this culture in this environment chose to wear what they wore. There has to be some, like, because I realized when Lawrence, they don't pronounce the L sometimes.
Well, they call him L. They think his name's L. Lawrence because L is like like the Lawrence. Yeah.
Right. I love that. It's so endearing. But when he takes and puts on his garb for the first time, I'm thinking to myself, man, it must be breezy up there, you know, like no more pants. Like he's got full flowing, like, you know, and Omar Sharif's character, Ali, says, it's good to ride in this. This is good to ride in. And it might be more comfortable to ride in, especially in that position where the one leg is over the camera and the other one is kind of wrapped around the little hump that not the hump of the camel, but the saddle. Anyway, so I was just curious. These are the small things in a movie because the movie is so great and intriguing and enthralling and just epic, and it's emotional and it's draining and it's just pure pleasure on every level that it starts to spark me into like mini rabbit holes. Like, why would you wear that? And does the thing that they wrap around their head to hold on the headdress, does that mean something? Like, does gold mean something? And the 3 or 4 of them had 2 wrapping around them instead of 4 wrapping around them. So these are just the small things. I didn't know if maybe you knew.
No, I hadn't gotten that.
You're over learning about camera lenses and stuff. I know we're being like stupid. Yeah. I get it.
So this is Peter O'Toole's first starring performance in a film. What did you think about that?
I don't understand it. I don't comprehend somebody who's that level of talent. Because he's 23, 24 in real life during this movie. And so this is his first performance on film. He didn't do anything smaller beforehand. This is his first.
Are you asking me? He did do some smaller stuff.
Yeah.
He did. He did some TV stuff, but then he also he was in a movie called The Day They Robbed the Bank of England. In fact, that's where David Lean saw him and said, I'm interested in Peter O'Toole for this role, because it had been kind of shopped around to a bunch of different people. In fact, they had already agreed on somebody, but he decided he didn't want to sign a contract. There was some sort of like 7-year contract or something with the studio, with Columbia Pictures, that he had to sign.
I mean, he picked the right guy. He picked the right guy because he goes from this overly confident or abundantly confident young guy who thinks he knows everything about everything, because he does, and into this world that is not known to him, but yet on some level it is known to him, and he loves it. He says that thing about what the one character says. It's like, he says something like, it'll be fun or it's going to be exciting. And the guy said, it's like burning hell. And he goes, exciting. And so he just is this character who knows exactly what he wants at 23, 24, 25, however old he is at this point. So when you meet the character in the beginning, there's something in my acting nature that says, okay, that's not that complicated. That this appropriately confident young guy is beginning his journey into being a fish out of water. And it all seems, he's not cocky, he's confident, but self-assured. That all makes sense to me. When it starts to become more complicated for him, especially at the end of the film. He becomes a different person through this journey. He becomes, his character arc, he goes from one person to another. And obviously he somehow gets back to where he was at the beginning of the film, because the film starts with his death, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't seem to be a complicated character. You don't really get to know a lot before what happens to him. The very beginning of the film happens, but he does seem to be a little bit more carefree, and that you do not know the trials and tribulations that this character's been through by any stretch of the imagination by seeing them get on his motorcycle and traveling down as fast as he can. You're getting the impression that this guy is just a balls to the wall character because he's just willing to get on his motorcycle and just go full tilt and not worry about anything. The irony, of course, is when what happens in the beginning of the film, I guess we're into spoilers anyway, but we're into spoilers. So let's say, go see Lawrence of Arabia, watch it. It doesn't matter if it's on your laptop. It doesn't matter if it's 4K. See this movie. If it was released in the theater, I would definitely go see it. I will definitely go see it. But I already know what's happening in this movie the second time. So to watch the opening sequence again, and for something, he's not reckless, he's just driving really fast. And for such a accident to happen, an impromptu accident, after all the stuff that he survived, this is what takes him out. It almost makes you chuckle with irony when you see it a second time, because you think to yourself, God, this guy has done all of this stuff, and yet this is how he dies. And it's confusing the first time you see it, but then when you see the motorcycle at the end of the film, and that's actually how the film ends, you think to yourself, all of this stuff, all of these people he saved, all of this stuff that he did, he gets shot, people die around him. He should have died a couple other times. His throat should have been cut at least 3 times in the film by people who were pissed at him. Yeah. And, he should have been He's
tortured by the Turkish Bay.
That's awful. That's so bad. That is actually a good example of, I'm not sure how somebody does something like that scene. That's why Peter O'Toole is the 8-time Academy Award nominee. He never won a competitive Oscar, and I don't remember how many times he's been nominated, but it's a lot. He does have an honorary Oscar, but that's why he's in the game that he's in. That's why he's at the top of the heap. His caliber of performance is, I think only he at that time could have done that scene the way that he did it, that torture scene the way that he did it. And the way that he really responds to that afterwards, with the blood on his shirt and how his body posture is different and how he's walking around like you already know there's something wrong with him, and then you see the blood on his shirt, and he kind of is trying to do that thing he does in the beginning where you don't focus on the pain, basically, is what he says in the beginning. I don't know the exact quote, but it's a great quote. So the opening sequence, you're thinking, okay, yeah, this is a young actor who's got a lot of charisma. Yeah, sure, this makes sense. He should be able to do all of this. There are certain sequences in this film, that it answers the question why I've never become a professional actor, because that I don't understand. I don't understand that talent. There's no other word for it, talent. It's a fully formed character already when you meet him. So where is he going to go from there? You're not sure. And to see the ebbs and flows in his character arc, and it's not even really a character arc. It's like a character in the beginning, and then in the middle of the film, he's a whole nother person. And at the end of the film, he's a whole nother person. And actually, they talk about that in the movie. The one guy goes, oh no, he's changed. The photographer, the journalist. And Omar Sharif goes, no, because Omar Sharif is in complete denial what happened to him with the Turkey guards and Jose Ferrer. No, he's changed. He has changed. He's a completely different person at that part of the film. And then that whole sequence where no prisoners, that whole sequence, he is a man on the bridge of a complete mental breakdown.
Yeah. He's manic, I think, at that point.
Yeah, he's manic is right.
Do you think that that's him looking at his family, his adopted family, and seeing the hurt and pain of that one man, and being like, you know what, we're all for him, and we're all gonna avenge him, and we're no man left behind, all that, the Gazim thing, like you, Omar Sharif, are willing to, to lose all these guys, but I'm their leader. They look up to me. The reason why they look up to me is that I have all of their best interests in mind. And that's like his driving force. That's what his perceived driving force, what he thinks his driving force is. But he comes to reckon that he just wants to be wanted. He wants to be revered. He wants to be the man that people look up to. And the people that he's found to look up to him are these Bedouins, are these tribes.
I think that's a really nice Josh Knapp 2020 way to look at it. And I think that says a lot about you as a person, that's how you perceive that. To me, it reminded me of that look Omar Sharif has in the beginning of the film, where this is what was supposed to happen. This guy is not supposed to be drinking from my well. He is in the wrong uniform, clothing. He is not of my tribe. He deserves to die, and he knew he was going to die because he knows he wasn't supposed to be doing what he's doing. That cold-blooded thing. I think at that point in the film, T.E. Lawrence is grappling with the fact that he's not only getting ready to go over the edge of insanity or sanity, he now has come to his breaking point, and he now understands that there are two choices. Don't kill a person because you're not supposed to kill people, or kill a person because they're doing something that they know they're not supposed to be doing. At that point, it's just like he's done. He's broken. And he's grappling with it. That's why all that manic behavior is coming. But when he finally says, when the guy gets shot and killed, the guy who pursues the Turks, and he's going to do it whether or not anybody's following him or not, when he gets killed, that's it. That's that point where, maybe that's the point where Peter O'Toole logically might not think this, but is it written? This is written. And so, I don't know. I don't think it's empathy towards people or revenge or anything like that. I think that there's just black and white choice at that point.
Yeah, I think he's feeling his power. I think he is feeling his power. He is like, whatever I say right now, all of these people, whatever it is, these 500 guys behind me are going to do whatever I say. And and the strategic way to go about it is Ali's way, is let's go around these guys. If we fight these guys, we will lose people. Yes, we may, eviscerate them, but we will lose people. We're not in the best position to take these guys down right now. And these guys didn't do anything to us. They just obliterated this one town, which is actually where you see, I think, the first woman in the film is those women that were like all just bloodied and beaten up.
Oh no, you see them earlier.
Worse.
When you're saying goodbye to everybody. You don't see them, but you hear them, and that whole like high pitching.
Yeah, when they leave to go across the desert. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, they're women. You don't necessarily know they're women, but they are.
Yeah.
But no, because then why didn't Omar Sharif go around the guy and taken for granted that why kill this guy in the beginning of the film?
I mean, he's protecting his land. He's protecting his well. That's different.
But this guy has done wrong. This guy has not followed the rules that are set up. That Turkish force has not followed the rules that are set up. Not that they followed the rules, but that, they're in a conflict. But they've done wrong. They've done wrong. And there's right and there's wrong. And when somebody's done wrong, you die. That's what's set up in the beginning of the film. Now, granted, T.E. Lawrence is having a breakdown at that moment. It's a complex sequence. It just really is very complex. I don't know how you play it. I don't know how you're in it. I don't understand anything about what he did. I mean, I felt it, but I don't understand going there. But he went there. I just think that he realizes his breaking point is right and wrong. And these people have done wrong. They must die. It is a revenge philosophy, but you could say that about any conflict that is a war between two people, two tribes, two countries. It's always a revenge. Somebody strikes and somebody takes revenge. But I don't know. It just sounds more complicated to me than him feeling his power. I think he feels his power on the train. And he's watching himself flow in the wind, and he's feeling their adoration, and they've accomplished something that, once again, somebody says can't be done. I'm like, can you stop saying that to that guy? What I've learned in the last 2.5 hours is don't tell T.E. Lawrence he can't do something. And then go along with it to see if it can happen. Because that's what those British soldiers do. They go along with it, not because they want to help, but to see if it's going to happen. And the one guy who kind of gives him a hard time, the one British commander who gives him a hard time, who actually has that great scene at the end. I don't know what the actor's name is. I don't have it up. He actually is dumbfounded that it happened. And he's looking around at all the people and all the devastation from the train. He's like, he did exactly what he said he was going to do. This guy is no joke.
Well, I think that first of all, the reason why they let him kind of like do what he ever wanted to do is that did somebody even say there was some line of some line along the lines of this area of the world theater of war is like a sideshow of a sideshow. It is like the least important, what they would consider the least important part of all the other things that are going on during World War One. So whether he goes down there and does one thing or another, like they're ultimately not going to care as much. But he does have bigger aspirations, and really his ultimate aspiration is to get the British out of their land, is to have the British relinquish their control over Egypt and over what they would gain by moving into Syria, by moving into Damascus and taking over an area that the Turks had occupied. So that right there is kind of like Lawrence's, it's kind of like, well, I mean, it's definitely a white savior thing. It's like, you guys can't do it yourself. I'm going to show up. I'm going to show you how to do this. The only way to do this is to work together. You've got, tribe A, tribe B, tribe C, tribe D. If you guys are all fighting against each other, that's going to allow the British or the Turks or whoever to come in and essentially control you while you're fighting over each other, and then they will have dominion over you. But what Lawrence wants to do is get whoever it is, even the British, out of there and allow them to govern themselves. But by the time we get to the end of the film, where Lawrence's big thing was, we will make it to Damascus before you do. We will take over. We as these tribes will take over Damascus and will control it before the British do, so that we can show you that we can handle all this and that we will, responsibly take care of all this stuff. But once they sit down at that big table and they try to figure out, like, you get the water, you get the electricity, blah, 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 it goes back to the infighting. And that's why that scene where the general, played by Jack Hawkins, the general just waits it out. He knows exactly what's going to happen, and he just waits it out, waits for all the chips to fall. And so the inherent bickering associated with each of these tribes, all the things that they just went through to get to Damascus and take it over, working together, wasn't enough to hold them together to keep Damascus running. And the most egregious example of that is what happened to the hospital for all the wounded, which Lawrence was just devastated by. But then he has some weird like laugh thing. I don't know. He goes a little crazy there. But did you notice in that scene where the British chief medical officer guy shows up and he's just absolutely appalled at the situation? Yeah. He runs in, and then that next scene is him seeing Lawrence in his fatigues, not in his robes, and treating him completely differently and just revering him. That's just such a well done scene. I was wondering if they were going to play upon that. They do a little bit of that in the Officers Club, where they bring you into the Officers Club. I mean, he's in the Officers Club like 3 times, and then especially when he comes into the Officers Club with his servant assistant. I don't know what to call the kid, but that's right.
That's fine.
The fact that he wants,
by this point, it's his friend.
It's his exact. They've been through a lot, so yeah. No. But, and he wants to make sure that he gets taken care of, and any kind of impropriety that may be happening at the time means nothing to him, because of all the people in that room, that kid is much closer to him than any one of those people ever will be. So the scenes, we talk about the huge, amazing panoramic scenes in the desert, but those scenes interacting with the bureaucracy, I think that they inform his character a lot also. And even the scene at the very beginning where people think that they know him or want to kind of like glom on to the reputation of T.E. Lawrence and what's been shown of him, whether it's I don't know if multiple people wrote about him in real life or what, but but specifically the Chicago newspaper guy, what he wrote about him. I mean, it's kind of like, check out this amazing British dude who, was able to do all this stuff, and we want to claim him as our own. Like the British people take T.E. Lawrence's reputation and take his achievements and say, like, we did this. We as British people did this. Whereas I'm sure that was the last thing that he would have wanted as a character. We can get into the historical inaccuracies of this film, but I don't think it's really that interesting. I think that as a movie, this character study is infinitely interesting. Whether it was based on an actual real person or not, it doesn't really matter to me because I'm more interested in this character in this film. But either way, I thought that was really interesting. The picture at the end of the film, when you see the newspaper article, they drop the newspaper article on, and the general sees the newspaper. That picture that was taken, we get to see that picture taken in the film, and it's when the photographer journalist comes up on him and he says, "Jesus wept," and he says it a couple of times, and then he sees that picture is of T.E. Lawrence taking in what all of the people, what all the tribes did at his direction, and also what he was a part of, this kind of like massacre that he was a part of. And his emotions in that moment, I think, are somewhat regretful, but the picture that's shown in the newspaper looks like honorable and forthright and confident and just like stiff upper lip and all of that. But that's not what the character was feeling at that exact moment, which shows you the power of the written word and the power of images, what they can do to inform other people of what a person is, of how a person is. It can totally shape the narrative of a whole person's life, and it might not have anything to do with what actually happened with that person.
Fake news.
It's fake news.
Okay, by the way, the actor I was talking about earlier was Anthony Quayle. He plays Colonel Brighton. He's the guy who is mesmerized what happens at the train, and he's the guy who walks out of the meeting at the end and says, "Excuse me, sir," and he's looking for T.E. Lawrence to kind of say, "I've been completely wrong about you." And he has that great silent moment where he has a little well of tears in his eyes, like he misrepresented this guy on so many levels for such a long period of time that now he regrets it. And it comes down to what's the prince's name? Alec Guinness's character,
Prince Faisal.
Is that how you say?
Faisal.
Thank you. Yeah, Faisal. And a general from the British military come and make a deal and say, "Listen, we'll get this running, but you can say you did it." So in the end, everything that T.E. Lawrence and everything that Ali and everything that I can't think of Anthony Quinn's character's name right now, what they've all done really comes down to two men sitting in a room negotiating over something because they couldn't get it done in their council meetings and trying to come together because of these old traditions of, I need to do this if you need to do that. And it goes back to that first scene. That first scene is epically great because it just tells you everything about the movie, that these are the decisions that these men make. Even though there are ebbs and flows in their character, Anthony Quinn goes one way at one point, although he stays pretty solid. Omar Sharif's character, Ali, goes one way, comes another way, feels sympathetic, then comes back and then completely changes by the end of the film. And that's why that great shot of him walking out of the conference or out of the meeting with Faisal and the general. And Anthony Quinn goes, "Why are you tearing up? Are you going to miss him?" And he's like, "No, that's not why I'm tearing up. I'm tearing up." For me, my interpretation was that we did all of this for nothing. All of these people died. I almost died for nothing. And then there's that great shot where Omar Sharif kind of fades into the darkness of the room and then turns around and looks right at him as he fades away. And I'm like, that's an Academy Award nominated performance right there, just in that little look right there. I don't know how you do it. Which brings me back to, I hope I made sense about what I was talking about with Peter O'Toole and acting. I'm not trying to denigrate any ability I might think I have or any ability that I've shown. I'm not saying that. I sometimes am perplexed by how these moments are forced onto screen by a performance. It blows me away. But you actually you pointed out something in the last thing that you were talking about when T. Lawrence and his friend / servant are coming into the officer's chamber and they want lemonade. It's those little quips that Peter O'Toole is able to get away with throughout the whole entire film that I think only he could do because he's so entrenched in the character. Sometimes those are the most perplexing moments as an actor that I don't understand how people go there. And you remember the young kid is drinking the lemonade really quick and he's making all the noise and he just goes, he likes your lemonade. He really likes your lemonade. And he just quips it out. And it's just you're right. It informs his character more in that line than all of the other traumatic things that you've seen up to the point. The way he's holding on to the young kid and pretty much not forcing him in, but pretty much leading him into this arena and up to that bar. He never lets go. That informs his character to me more than a lot of other things. So it's interesting because Gregory Peck won the Best Actor Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch. How could you argue it? It's Atticus Finch. There's no discussion. How could Gregory Peck not win the Oscar? But Peter O'Toole falls into that category of every single time he's nominated and should have won, there's always somebody like Atticus Finch who wins. So you can't not have that performance win. Because it is just movie history, that performance. But this should have been Peter O'Toole's Oscar-winning performance because it is just epic and stunning and just entrenched in the moment-to-moment stuff that he does. But those little quips that he has are what really makes it. I don't think anybody else could have done it.
Well, it could have been Albert Finney. That's who David Lean's number one choice was. But when they went to have him sign a 7-year deal, he said no. It would be a young Albert Finney. There are screen tests out there with him in it. I haven't seen any of them, but
okay. Tom Jones was 1963, starring Albert Finney. The next year, winning the Best Picture Oscar, and Albert Finney did not win that Oscar. So this film's only a year later, and if you look at pictures of him and Tom Jones, I can't see it. I can't see T.E. Lawrence. Oh, yeah, I can. Never mind. I see it. I get it. I see it. Okay. But Peter O'Toole it's done. Sealed in history. I do want to say something in general about everybody who has subscribed to our YouTube channel. Thank you for that. If you do go to our YouTube channel, please subscribe. We've gotten some great comments. We've gotten some great feedbacks. We have quite a few people watching quite a few of our videos. So that's a really good thing. So if you go to our YouTube channel, Actor and Engineer, just subscribe and let us know what you think.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. And we'll see you next time.